Yo, what is up guys, welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to talk about the FX order on the mixer channel. In all the DAWs, FL Studio, Ableton, Pro Tools, Logic, whatever, we have a mixer channel where we apply effects to the sounds. We apply EQs, we apply reverbs, distortion, sidechain, and all these things. And the order here is so important, and most of you don't really know this. Also, you don't really know what is the good order. So today I want to talk about this. I'm going to show you some examples of why it's important to keep an order and why it's important to have some effects before or after other effects. And at the end I'm going to show you my the perfect order for me, we could say. Don't forget to scroll down and leave a like, and let's start with it. So here I have just the normal kick of FL Studio. And here in the mixer channel, as we can see, we have lots of slots for effects. We have 10 in FL Studio. And here I loaded one EQ and one distortion plugin. So why is it important to have the EQ before or after the distortion plugin? The best way to show you this is by an example, alright? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to distort a lot the sound, the kick, okay? I'm going to distort to the max. What happens if I EQ before the distortion plugin? As we can see, it changes a lot the sound, especially with the low frequencies. And that's because when we get to the distortion plugin, we have a completely different sound. So if we are not applying an EQ, we have the normal kick and then we distort it. But if we apply an EQ, we are altering this sound. We are changing the waveform, we are changing the frequency, we are changing everything of this sound. So when it gets to the distortion is gonna apply a different sound at the end because it has different frequencies. What happens if we apply an EQ later? So if we have something like this, now what's gonna happen is we have the normal kick, we apply the distortion, and then we EQ it. But the EQ is just gonna EQ the distortion, alright? So for example, if we increase the low end, now the sound is changing. Of course, it has more sub, but it's not changing as much as before because now we are just EQing the distorted sound. And we are not distorting an EQed sound. That's the difference. So in my opinion, it's better to have the EQ before the distortion, because what I try to do is first EQ and get the sound I want, and then I just distort it to add some more harmonies and a fatter sound. But the thing is that with the EQ, I try to clean the sound before we get distortion, because for example, when we distort, we add a lot of low frequencies. And if you have maybe a lead sound or noise or something that is more in the mid-highs, you don't really want the low end. So it's better to cut before. So it's like the distortion plugin is like it doesn't dedicate time to distort the low frequencies because you don't want it. And if you apply the EQ later, you just EQ in the distorted sound, but it's not really gonna change the sound. You're just adding more lows or less mids or less highs or whatever you want, but the sound is gonna be the distorted one. But what happens about compression? It's better to EQ before or after the compressor. If you don't know what a compressor is or how to compress, the last tutorial is about compression for dummies, so I showed you there the basics of compression, so go and check it out if you're interested in that. What happens now is that we have the kick here, then we apply the EQ we want, okay, whatever it is, and then we apply the compressor. So what's gonna happen is that we're gonna compress the EQed sound. So at the end, the final result that gets to the master is the EQed kick, whatever you have made to it, but you're gonna have it compressed. What happens if you EQ later? If you have the kick here, then you compress it, you glue the kick. If we apply a really heavy compression, you're gonna have it like flat, and then with the EQ, you're gonna be adding frequencies or reducing frequencies, and this way you're gonna mess with the compression. It's not gonna be compressed. To show you this, I have here the SM exoscope, so it shows the kick. I'm gonna compress a lot. If we EQ it, whatever we do, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna do it like this maybe. We have this kick. What happens if we apply the EQ later? If we take out the EQ, we're gonna have this kick. Okay, as you can see, it's more or less here. The first one sometimes happens this, that has more attack. But what happens if now we apply the EQ? Can you see the big difference? That's the final kick you're gonna have in the track. So in my opinion, it's better to EQ before, so you compress everything before you hear it. This way, when you mix your track, you're gonna have the sounds compressed. You're gonna have an average volume that is not gonna be changed because of the EQ that you apply later, or even if you after this you apply some distortion or whatever, it's gonna be altering this compression. So in my opinion, it's better to put the compression later. This way you're gonna have a compressed sound. Now in this example we have the reverb and we have the compression, and what do we do prefer, the reverb before or after the compression? This depends more on what you want to achieve, because well, basically everything depends on what you want, but in this case you're gonna have pretty different sounds. I rarely have the reverb in the same mixed channel. What I usually do is I create a new one, so I'm gonna call this one as reverb. Okay, we do just link it here with clicking with the left click, and here is where I apply the reverb. All right, so in one channel, in this one, I have everything, you know, I treat the dry signal as whatever I want. So I apply EQ, I apply distortion, I apply compression, whatever I want. And then in the reverb I do the same, okay? So I apply the EQ before or after. So what happens here is that you're not applying the reverb before or after. The truth is that, yeah, we are applying later because first we have here the sound, it uses all the effects that you're using, and then it goes to reverb bus with that sounds applied, all right? But then here the reverb is not compressed or is not distorted. You have a reverb of a distorted or compressed sound, but the reverb is not distorted or compressed. So sometimes what I do, I link both to one bus. So you just take two, root to track only. So now those two go here. Remember to click again here on the reverb. So the dry signal needs two like cables, and the reverb just one. So they are here. I'm gonna increase the reverb. So here you can compress, and here you can EQ, and here you can do whatever you want. So now the sound is gonna be affecting both sounds. So for example, if we are in the dry signal, we have the reverb. What's gonna happen is that if we apply the reverb before the compression, the reverb is gonna have this compression, and the sound of the reverb is gonna be closer to the dry signal. You can see that here. This reverb. But if we have it later, it's gonna be different, because we're gonna have a compressed sound, but the reverb is not gonna be compressed. So it's gonna be lower in volume because we are not reducing the dynamic range. Now let's talk about delay and reverb. I remember that I asked you this in Instagram, and a lot of people use the delay before and a lot of people use delay after. In my opinion, it's better to use it before, and I'm gonna explain why. We have now a dry signal that is the sine wave. And with delay, what you're creating is like you're duplicating the sound. You're creating like a reverb, because basically delay is reverb, but it's dry. It's like you're duplicating the sound, nothing else. It has the same sound but duplicating. If we apply the reverb, what we're gonna have now is a dry signal that have a delay, so it's duplicated, and then we're gonna apply a reverb to this sound, to everything. If it has delay or if it doesn't have delay. If we apply the delay later, what we're gonna have is we have the dry signal, we apply reverb to the dry signal, so now we have a wet signal with reverb, and then we're gonna be applying a delay that is a dry duplication of the sound. So the delay is not gonna be wet. You're gonna have a wet sound, a wet sine wave in this case, but the delay, the duplications of this sound are gonna be dry. The end result is not really a big difference. You cannot really probably you cannot really hear the difference. Let's compare. If the delay is before, and the delay is after. As you can see, there's not really a difference, but in theory, it has more sense to have the delay before, because this way the delay is also wet. But now the delay actually is not wet, okay? It's something weird, it's something that you cannot really hear the difference, so just do it the way you want. But in my opinion, it has more sense to have the delay before and then have the reverb. And finally, in my opinion, the most important one in the orders that you apply is the sidechain. Where we do apply the sidechain? We apply it before, in the middle, here, or at the end. My advice is to apply it at the end always. Always. Of course, if you wanna try different things and have it before, in the middle, or whatever, to create kind of more unique sound, experiment and those things, do it. But if you're gonna apply the sidechain because you want to leave a space for the kick that basically is the main reason why we apply sidechain, put it at the end. And the reason behind this is what I said before. We want the sidechain just to leave a space for the kick. So we don't want anything to alter the sidechained sound. The sidechain is just to leave a space to reduce the volume when the kick hits and to add the pumping effect and nothing else. So just create the sound that you want with the distortion you want, with the EQ you want, with the compression you want, with the reverb you want, and then apply the sidechain. And this way it's gonna be a lot cleaner. The best way to show you this is with a compressor. Here I have this sidechain, here I have a compressor, and here just a sidechain that, well, is the plugin, but it's not applying sidechain, as you can see, just to see the waveform. If the compressor is not working, we're gonna have what we can see here. We can see that it increases, and here we have the full sound, and here we have less sound because of this sidechain. But what happens if we compress a lot the sound? As you can see now, we have sound here that we didn't have before. As you can see here, we don't have sound. It's sound we start having here, but not a lot, and basically here is the entire sound. But with the compressor, we have the entire sound all the time. So we don't really have the sidechain, just a little bit here, but we are not adding that pumping effect. So what happens, that this difference between volume is not here because we compressed a lot. Because what we do in compression is reduce the dynamic range, so the louder peaks are reducing and now are more or less at the same volume of the lower ones. So if we compress after the sidechain, we are destroying the sidechain basically, because we are not gonna have this difference in volume. So that's why I prefer to add sidechain at the end, because this way you're gonna have the sidechain you want. You're not gonna have anything that is gonna alter this, because with distortion can happen the same, because with EQ sometimes can happen the same. So I just prefer to have the sidechain at the end, and this way is a lot safer. And finally, here I have my perfect order, or the order I like to use. I first have the normal sound, then I apply some EQ, so this way I have a sound that I like, the way I want it. Then I apply some distortion, sometimes I use OTT, sometimes I use Coma Crusher, or sometimes I use both. This way you add more harmonies and you start compressing a bit the sound. Well, as I said, I use reverb sense, but I would use the delay and the reverb. The order, as I said, use the one you prefer. Then I use the deglue. This way I compress the actual sound I have, because with the plugins I have up here, I create the sound that they want. So this way I compress that final result. Then I apply some filter, because this way, if you have the filter before the compressor, sometimes it's gonna be compressing, sometimes not, so you're not gonna have a more unified average volume. After that, I apply a limiter to cut the peaks, and I put the limiter after the filter for the same reason, because if we have the limiter before and then we apply the filter, as sometimes the filter, in this case, for example, this one has some resonance, it's gonna be, for example, here is not gonna be that loud as here, and this way, here you're not gonna be limiting, here you're gonna be limiting. So you're not creating like an average volume, you're not creating like a flat, we don't want exactly flat, but a kind of flat sound. And finally, after I have the complete sound EQ'd, distorted, with reverb, compressed, with filters, limited, whatever I want, at the end, when I have the sound that I want to have in my song, I apply sidechain, and in this way I leave a space for the kick. So well guys, this is the order I use in my plugins. This is why it's important to have some order. This is why sometimes it's good to have some sound, some effects before or after some other effects. And well, I hope this way you know better how to mix, how to apply effects actually in your mixer channel. And I think now if you know these things, you're gonna be getting better sounds at the end, and that's what we actually want. So if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a like. If you have some questions because I didn't explain well something, or you didn't understand, or whatever, just leave it in the comments. Subscribe to the music tutorial, and guys, see you in the next video.